Hey guys, welcome back to Project 100. We're in the third week of this. We are getting into a really exciting phase for me because it's where we get to start throwing a baseball, sort of, but not really. I like to call this the decelerative focus of the program, which is about 2 weeks before we actually go to throw a ball. We're going to focus a lot on the decelerators that are responsible for kind of allowing us to aggressively accelerate and be able to handle the load of learning how to kind of hit the brakes a little bit as we throw. John, I want to ask you, in your opinion, what the focus and the significance is of focusing on those decelerators before we even pick up a baseball.
So early off season, we spend, when we're throwing, or getting ready to throw, a lot of the time focusing on putting the brakes in place, making sure that when we start to unramp a little bit, that the ability to slow our arm down after the throw is greater than the ability to accelerate it. This is going to keep us healthy, hopefully keeps away from that dreaded dead arm that a lot of guys get plagued with early in their throwing schedules each year. So we use a variety of different throwing deceleration motions. DJ really prefers to do holds. We'll do 2 pound, 1 pound, and all that, and go through it. And it's nothing crazy specific. It's something that he's done the past few years. It's made his arm feel really good. It doesn't always have to be super technical. If you find something that you can internally feel and realize, hey, I feel great when I do this all the time, there's probably something to it. So we know that that works with him. Other guys who train with us will also use a significant uptick in their angular trampoline work, maybe some throwing sock work. So early off season though, when we start to on-ramp for throwing, it's been a really useful tool to put that in. Both of us believe in not huge shutdown periods to where you're not throwing. Going through this long muscle building process without moving the arm that you want, the way that you want to move it in season, can be a recipe for disaster. You build all this dumb muscle and you go to throw and it has no idea what the throwing motion even feels like. It doesn't function for it. So that's part of it too. You can do this stuff much earlier in your off season without taking as long a shutdown and not incur any damage. You're actually just building on top of maintaining the throwing motion. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to build off that a little bit because I think one of the biggest shifts of focus came from when Noah Syndergaard had put on all that mass before he ended up getting his first Tommy John surgery. They asked Tom House of the NPA about it, and he made this pretty bold prediction where he had said, watch out, in May and June, there's a very high likelihood that he might sustain a major injury. And people are like, what are you talking about? He's in the best shape he's ever been in his life. And then fast forward, unfortunately it happened, and never wish that upon anybody. Yeah, it was a lat situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're right. So it wasn't TJ, but it was lat. And they went back to him and they were like, well, how did you know that? And, well, it's simple. You've heard of the phrase muscle memory, and there's so many different ways that you can use that. But when you build X amount of mass over a period of time and you're not going through the periodization of throwing and teaching a guy how that's supposed to move, that muscle has no idea how it's supposed to function from both an accelerative, decelerative phase, and how it's supposed to, kind of move from each specific direction. And if you don't teach that muscle how to move while it's accruing that mass over time, inevitably something bad might happen. It's more prone to happen now. It's not a guarantee that it's going to happen, but there's a much higher likelihood that if you don't feed the information to the system itself, it's going to have a really high likelihood that it's going to start breaking down over time. Decelerators, that's a focus that I like to do. It's not for everybody, but I'm a big believer in what I like to call feel versus real, right? There's a lot of coaches out there that are always using scientific jargon. They're using the same phrases. There's a lot of muddy waters of the same information that's being pushed out there right now. One of the biggest segues from going as a first-year coach or a coach who's just getting into it and getting really excited to share every bit of information that they've kind of gathered over time is also being able to put ego to the side, putting yourself off to the side and saying, hey, this athlete really likes the feel of this. He's getting results from this. It might not be the most optimal way to present it, and it might not be the most optimal pattern, but the thing is the human body is so unique in the sense that so many people move so differently. You can take the top 10 100-mile-an-hour guys in the big leagues, and you can find 2 to 3 similarities, but you can find a lot of things that they do different from one another. I love to focus on the decelerator phases of the pre-throwing routines because it allows me to feel like I'm almost installing brakes into a car. You're never going to drive a car that fast if you don't trust the brake system that's installed in it. So for me, I kind of have this thought process of, can I handle stopping on a dime if I'm going to move this fast? And if not, we need to work on that before I even pick up the baseball. So, and if you're asking yourself right now, hey, how can I systematically program this into my off-season throwing? Well, I got good news. If you actually click the link below, you're gonna see that I'm dropping a free 8-week throwing program. John and I have gone over it together, and we wanna make sure that you have all the tools necessary to move forward. There's a lot of people out there that don't have the direction because they're either nervous to get on a program, or they're nervous to go in-house, or maybe even throw around other guys. We wanna give this program to you to make sure that you're following something that has somewhat of a specificity to it, but is overall a very safe way to kind of progress properly through the throwing program itself during the course of an off season. So John, I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about nutrition, and you wanted to talk about the importance that can play for athletes as they continue to develop over time. I know for me, it was a major change in 2020 when I went through the whole journey of going on Weight Watchers. I lost 30 pounds. Then we discussed how much protein I was actually missing and how much I needed in my daily intake. I want you to kind of explain a little bit more on the importance of it.
We talk about nutrition all the time in-house here with a lot of our guys. If you're a high schooler or a middle school guy, chances are you're not big enough. You're not strong enough, 99% of you. And even if maybe you got some extra that you want to lose, nutrition is really important for you. When we look at it, we see a lot of guys who are extremely motivated. They come into the weight room 4, 5, 6 days a week, absolutely crushing lifts. Down the road a few weeks, and then it's like they're not getting a lot bigger. You ask them, and they're like, "Wow, I can't put any weight on. I just can't. This is the most used expression by a high school guy I've ever heard. I can't put weight on." It's not true. You either don't understand what you're actually ingesting, you don't understand the equation of how to put it on. I want to simplify it for you. When we look at putting weight on, we need to do two things. We need to be, number one, in a calorie surplus, and two, get enough protein to build actual muscle. When a calorie surplus means we have all these daily activities like heart rate, brain function, just walking around, brushing your teeth, sitting on the couch, all these things burn calories. So what do you burn naturally in the day? And then involving your activities, maybe that's a lift, maybe that's practice for 3 hours, that's also gonna burn a lot of calories. For you to put on any weight, you have to go above and beyond that from a caloric standpoint. So if you burn 4,000 in a day, the only physically possible way to put weight on is to go to 5,000 or 4,500 or above it, barring pharmaceutical type intervention, which we do not advocate.
We do not condone any illegal pharmaceuticals in your off-season programming or in season for that matter.
So we have to get this surplus started. We have to be above, and then so basically this will flip a light switch on in your body that says grow, based on the stimulus you gave it throughout the day, the week, whatever. That's lifting stimulus, all these other things. It will grow what you ask of it. The second checkpoint is going to ask, do I have the required proteins and peptides and aminos to build muscle? Which means you need to get enough protein. And not all proteins created equal. Good rule of thumb, if you're an athlete, you're trying to gain around 1 gram per pound you are. Okay? If you go too high, a lot of guys just absolutely decimate protein. They go up to 1.3, 1.4. They actually lose weight because protein's so filling, they don't get the calories required to flip that first light switch on. So stick around 1 and just push the calories. Getting a little more in depth with this, if you're really trying to gain, the human body is never in a homeostatic state in terms of weight, meaning it's never staying the same. You're either growing or shrinking, catabolic or anabolic. So anabolic's growing, catabolic shrinking. Knowing this, ingesting food as often as possible can keep you in that growth state and eliminate some of the shrinking periods. When you go to sleep at night, make sure you're ingesting something that's really heavy dense in protein, specifically casein protein. That you're going to find that in milk
cottage
products.
Cheese. Yep.
You can supplement it with cottage cheese. You can supplement it with casein protein powder. Casein it's absorbed differently through the body. It takes a lot longer to break down, so we kind of trick our body into staying in that growth mode while we're sleeping, instead of shrinking 6-7 hours a night. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, but guys don't put enough emphasis on this. Please pay attention, because you can kill it in the weight room, but if you don't have the nutrients, nothing's going to happen. You can maybe move a little bit more weight, maybe move it a little faster. These are neurological changes. These are not muscular changes. You're not getting bigger. You're not raising the ceiling. You're just actualizing your potential. We need to first raise the ceiling and then start to realize the potential. So without the nutrition side, getting larger cross-sectional muscle size is impossible. So I would much rather a guy came into the weight room, murdered it for 20-25 minutes, and then spent the other 23 hours of the day focused on getting the nutrients he needs every single day, than a guy coming in for an hour 15 minutes, killing the weight room, and then going home and laying on the couch and forgetting about the nutrients that his body needs. The guy at 20 minutes is going to have a much bigger reward. So focus on your nutrition, okay? You have anything to add?
You're probably asking yourself, why are we talking about nutrition before we even pick up a baseball? Or why this early in the offseason are we talking about nutrition? And one of the reasons why we might be talking about it right now is because before we go to pick up a baseball, we're in a very unique window of opportunity where we can lift in the weight room with very specific types of demand that are a lot more stressful than if we were getting closer towards the competition level of our season, right? So whether we're in a myohypertrophy phase, whether we're in escalation density training, high volume or French contrast, it's different based on the individual, based on, where are you at right now in your development career and what type of specific demands do you need. If you don't have this nutrition side dialed in when you're stressing yourself harder than any other time of the year, your body's gonna break down a lot more than it probably should be. I know the biggest change that I made in 2020 was going from that 100 to 120 grams of protein to getting that 1 gram per 1 pound of body weight, which for me at the time was about 260. It was hard to get to 260 at first, and then I started finding different tips and tricks on how to sneak 20 to 40 grams of protein here and there throughout the course of the day. And I started to notice that not only was I able to start increasing the amount of weight week over week that I was doing with French contrast methods, which we'll get into in later weeks, but I noticed that when I woke up the next day, I wasn't so debilitated. I didn't feel as terrible as I did, and I didn't let off the gas pedal the next day in the weight room. I was able to consistently push myself day over day, and I noticed that I was able to kind of squeeze in 1 or 2 more reps in specific areas of focus, especially when I was looking at like the auxiliary types lifts. And 1 rep, 2 rep doesn't sound like a lot, but compound that over time versus each individual lift, and you're talking about a huge amount of aggregated gains in a shorter window of time, right?
Big volume change.
So nutrition, can't stress it enough. It's a very important factor, especially when you're in the phase of beating your body up to the brink of destruction and then you're trying to build it back up and then you're trying to add velocity or maybe just overall sustained performance throughout the course of a season. I want to add another thing here. If you had to pick 3 foods that you could contribute towards sustained growth for high school athletes that are trying to just put on mass in general, I know one of them would be some form of casein protein the night before bed, whether it's cottage cheese or maybe a supplement of some sort, just like a protein powder. Another one that we've really seemed to enjoy lately is we'll go to the local grocery store where they have like chili pre-made for us, and we'll just get like a medium bowl of chili or something like that because it's a budget-friendly option, but we're talking 50, 60 grams of protein in that cup right there alone. So that might be number 2, but if you had to pick, like, you have the components, you have the time, the luxury of getting this in your kitchen day in and day out, what would you say would be one of the biggest contributing factors for sustained growth for a high school athlete?
Meat, any meat. Any meat that you eat is going to go a really long way. We're getting into the nitty gritty here. There's only a small portion of the digestive tract that processes proteins. Liquid proteins move through there pretty quick. You can only process 10 to 15 grams per hour. So a lot of times when guys take just straight protein shakes, they excrete half of the proteins that they're getting in there before they even get a chance to utilize them. So we can go into further depth on proteins at a later episode, but meat moves through really slow. So even though we only digest 10 to 15 an hour, it's gonna take a few hours for meat to move through. You're gonna digest that entire burger or that chicken sandwich or the steak that you ate. You're gonna get all those proteins. And if you really wanna get into it, you can go online and look at digestion rates. There's a few different graphs that show you which proteins are most bioavailable in the human body. Pretty much all meats are at the very top of this food chain, and then so are all milk products. So meat and milk products, your body can utilize really well to create muscle. And then some of the other proteins that go underneath it, like legumes and nuts and grain proteins, actually are utilized really terribly by the body. They don't count towards putting on protein as much. So meat and dairy, if I had to pick 2 things that I could only eat to stay healthy and get really strong, it would be, probably red meat and then Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt, and they're not all the same. A lot of Greek yogurts have a lot of additives and a lot of things that our body doesn't need. You want to look at which probiotics are involved in the Greek yogurt that you choose, because that's really great for gut health. And if your gut's healthy, you're healthy. If your gut's healthy, you break down proteins before they even get there, you absorb more. And Greek yogurt has a ton of protein per serving. So you have 2-3 servings of that a day, you have a steak, you're already at 150 grams of protein. And it's all great protein. That's what I would put in my fridge.
Guys, thank you for tuning in. This is another episode of Project 100. Be sure to like and subscribe to us. Our YouTube channel, Good Baseball, Prime Athletics 1. Follow us on all our social medias, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Be sure to follow us on that. We're going to keep dropping useful tips and tricks along the way of this off season to make sure that you're getting everything that you need out of your programming.